Do I need to press the okay, cool. Awesome. So welcome everybody to our webinar on how to read your PIT data. My name is Ava Paredes. I am the data coordinator here at THN. I'm sure you all know who you are, so I'll save the pleasantries for later. Let's go ahead and just dive right into it. So let's chat about our agenda for the day. So we're going to start with a quick overview of the PIT count just to refresh our memories. We're going to go over the different report types that you should have received. We're going to do a quick overview of the first page of the PIT reports. We're going to talk a bit about the data quality section, and then we're going to go into the household breakdown section. And at the very end, we're going to chat a little bit about what to actually do with your PIT data, and then we'll have some time at the end for Q&A and some time to wrap up, as well as some resources that we'll pass along to y'all. Okay. So let's start off with just a quick brief overview of the point in time count, just to refresh our memories. So I have the who, what, when, where, and why of the point in time count. So the who, obviously, is individuals and families residing in unsheltered locations, not meant for human habitation, as well as individuals and families residing in sheltered locations. The what is the PIT count. Of course, it aims to provide a snapshot of the individuals and families experiencing homelessness in a geographical area over the course of one night. When is the last 10 nights in January? If y'all remember, we had our PIT count on Thursday, January 26th. And where is the Texas Balance of State COC? So the PIT count occurs across our geography in communities like yours and across the country as well. On the screen, you'll see a screenshot of the actual survey results from our mobile app. And why? Finally, for why? Okay. So for awareness, in order to advocate to local governments to understand the extent of homelessness by determining the number of people experiencing it within our geography, to secure funding, as the data can be used to secure grant funding, and finally for engagement, as the PIT count encourages communities to get involved in ending homelessness. All right, so now that we have our brains primed, let's talk about the three different report types that you should have received. So the three report types are sheltered, unsheltered, and combined, and I'm going to go through each one of those. So the sheltered reports contain the data for all of the folks that are sheltered on the night of the count. So this includes people in emergency shelters and transitional housing. We have the unsheltered reports, which contain the data for all of the folks that are living in a place not meant for human habitation on the night of the count. So what we mean by this is, folks living on the streets, living in outdoor encampments, perhaps in an abandoned building, and other places not meant for human habitation. And then we have the combined report, which contains data for both the sheltered and the unsheltered, for the sheltered and the unsheltered count within your region or geographic area. So if you want to find total demographic data for a particular population within your region, perhaps you want to find the total number of people of a particular gender or of a particular race, the combined report is where you should start. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a quick overview of the first page of your PIT reports. So on the first page, you will see the geography for this report in the middle of it, highlighted there in blue, as well as the type of report you are viewing at the top. As you can see, we are seeing a combined report for all geographies within the Texas Balance of State, COC. So the first page also gives you a basic breakdown of the population of your geographic region based on age and a few subpopulations, such as chronically homeless folks and homeless veterans. So if you want to know the specifics about how chronically homeless is defined, in the chat, we're going to link a HUD document that explains this definition. I'm going to do that real quick for y'all. Perfect. It should be sent to y'all if y'all want to use that as a resource. So I have also wanted to mention that I have received some questions about the three age categories, adult, youth, and children, not adding up to the total population number at the top of this report. So this is basically just because homeless youth, due to the age range of 18 to 24, which is what they're categorized as, those are already included under the adults category. So this means if you want to find the total number of all the people within your geography, all you have to do is add up the adults and the children. So no need to add the youth in there because they're already counted under adults. There's a little bit of overlap there. Okay, and at the very bottom, below the population table, we will also see a bar chart of the population breakdown, including the subpopulations that we just mentioned, chronically homeless people and veterans experiencing homelessness. Okay, before we move on, I want to just stop and see if we have any questions in the chat. Feel free to drop any questions that you might have in there. Seems like we're doing pretty good so far. Okay, not seeing anything. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep going. But if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat below and we'll go ahead and answer them. All right. Oh, is this the right? There we go. Okay. So let's talk about the data quality check section next. So for the data quality check section, I want to mention that it's very important to note how the report actually counts those errors. So errors are counted when a response is left blank. There are certain instances where a respondent might answer don't know or refuse to a particular question, and this is not represented within the data quality check section. It will only count an error when the response for a particular question is left blank. And I'd also like to note that the don't know and refuse responses are also not represented anywhere else within this report. So sometimes your totals for certain demographics might not add up to the total number of people within your geography because of this complexity related to how the report counts blanks and errors, as well as don't know and refused responses. So some of these data quality issues can also be mitigated by working towards comprehensiveness when gathering data, of course. Our goal is to have as few missing data elements as possible. And even though we can't get people to answer every single question, we want to at least give folks the opportunity to answer all of the questions. But I would like to stress, even though I said that, it is important to note that we want to give people the opportunity to, answer those questions. But there are always going to be cases where some people might not want to answer questions about maybe their gender, race, or ethnicity. And that is perfectly okay and totally to be expected in the PIT count process. Some people might not know off the top of their head the answers to these questions because of the trauma that homelessness can cause to folks. And others might simply just not want to answer them, and that is perfectly fine as well. So that is a little overview of the data quality check section. All right. So before we go into the different household types on your report, I first want to point out the difference between a household and a person. So households are families, and persons are the individuals that make up those families. The reason the report is broken down this way is because this is how we ultimately are reporting the data to HUD. So our three households are households with children, households without children, and households with only children. So households with children, these households have at least one person over the age of 18 and one person under the age of 18. Households without children, the members of this household are all adults over the age of 18. And then households with only children. So the members of this household are all children under the age of 18. Perfect. Super simple, y'all. So let's move on to the demographics section. So each household report page will have its own demographic breakdown for gender, race, and ethnicity. So if you want to know the totals for any of these demographics, you're going to have to add them up across those three main household categories that we talked about on the previous slide. The reports do not give us a page for total demographic data for all households, such as total race, age, ethnicity, and gender. So in order to find that total data, we need to manually add them up across those three broad household types for each of the demographics. So we have put in a request with our vendor Simtech for our data gathering app to make a total households page, but unfortunately we can't guarantee that that will be implemented in the future, but we can all cross our fingers together. So for now, we have to add them up manually, unfortunately. It is important to note that for these demographics, that sometimes a respondent might answer a question with more than one choice. So say, for example, someone might identify as multiple races. The report will not classify people under each one of those races. So the report doesn't classify people under multiple categories in these kinds of situations. If someone selects more than one race, they are automatically categorized as having multiple races. The gender question works in a similar fashion in that, if somebody selects two or more gender options, it will count them under a gender other than singularly female or male. If you want to see each individual responses for those demographics, keeping in mind and knowing that it will be greater than the total number of people on your PIT reports, please let us know. Email us at data@thn.org, and we can send over an Excel spreadsheet with that information. Cool. All right. And Kira noted that, for the reports we posted to the website, we created a totals page on there for y'all, just to make it a little bit easier. All right. So let's talk about some of the subpopulations that we count in the point in time count and that are shown on our PIT reports. So there are several different subpopulations accounted for within the PIT reports. So the PIT reports also give you a breakdown of veteran households with and without children. And there are also two youth pages as well, one for unaccompanied youth and one for parenting youths. So unaccompanied youth are people between the ages of 0 to 24 who are unaccompanied on the night of the count, meaning that they are without their parents or guardians. And there are parenting youth who are people between the ages of 18 to 24 with at least one child under the age of 18. So it's also important to note which subpopulations overlap with the three main household types that we talked about earlier. This is where some of these subpopulation households are also counted under those three broad household types. Veteran households with at least one child and one adult, and parenting youth, where the parents are 18 years and older, will overlap with the households with at least one child and one adult category. So veteran households without children and unaccompanied youth age 18 and older will overlap with the households without children category. And finally, unaccompanied youth under the age of 18 and parenting youth where the parents are under the age of 18 will overlap with the households with only children category. All right. Cool. So at the very end of the PIT reports is a section called Additional Homeless Populations. So these include people with serious mental illnesses, substance abuse disorders, HIV/AIDS, and domestic violence survivors. You will see another bar chart below the table that has individuals living with a chronic condition and DV survivors highlighted there in orange. So the orange just stands for the people who responded yes to the particular question regarding their status with a particular chronic condition or if they are a survivor of domestic violence. Cool. So I know that that was a lot of information to take in. I'm going to stop again right here just to see if we have any questions before we dive into our discussion on presenting your PIT data. So if you have a question, please type it below in chat. I need to take a quick breather here because I'm talking a lot today. Any takers? Not really seeing anything.
Looks like you're good.
All righty, we'll just keep on going along. All right, so before we get into our discussion on actually presenting your data, I want to take some time to remind folks about some of the variables that your community may have encountered during the 2023 PIT season. I'm starting here because depending on the variables that were in play in your community, you may decide you want to limit the scope of your analysis. So on the screen are the variables broken down by sheltered and unsheltered count. However, there may have been factors that affected both of your counts, both sheltered and unsheltered. For example, we did notice that we had a significant increase in volunteer participation for both counts, particularly for the unsheltered count. We had much more clear weather. It was significantly more consistent and less severe than it was in 2022. We also wanted to note that for both of these counts, COVID-19 was much less of a significant factor in people's willingness to participate. We had higher rates of volunteer recruitment, like we mentioned before, and there was higher willingness to participate in the surveys, both by volunteers and by our unhoused neighbors. We also noticed a significant increase in hotspot mapping and planning in advance of the count. For the shelter count, of course, the closure of projects, the opening of new ones, the increase in the number of hotel or motel voucher projects, and increase in bed capacity due to the removal of social distancing protocols, since we're kind of in this post-COVID state. All right, so with all of that in mind, let's talk about some ways to find talking points using the reports. So on the top of this slide, there is a percent change formula. The really cool thing about the type of analysis that I cover in this presentation is that it doesn't really require any complex math. Many of the data points that you may be hoping to find can come from simple formulas like this one, which can easily be Googled if you forget. And we're also going to make this downloadable on our website so you can check this out as well. The second most common talking point I am asked to go over is what the percentage is of a particular group in relation to the whole population. Examples of this are listed on this slide, including what percentage of adults are experiencing homelessness for the first time, or even going a step deeper to find out what the percentage is of a subpopulation in relation to another subpopulation. Now, while the formula on the bottom of this slide is also fairly simple, it's important to remember that you ensure that you are dividing by the correct number. So an example of this is if you're trying to find the percentage of veterans within your population, you would only divide by the number of adults within your geography, because of course, children cannot be veterans. They are under the age of 18. Cool. So below are also two examples of data points that were derived from this type of analysis. One example demonstrates a way to use written text in conjunction with icons. On the right, we have the percentage of homeless veterans within our geography. And on the left, you can see a simple pie chart that demonstrates the comparison of three data points. In this case, we have percentage of gender. All right, so now for the most complex analysis that I'm going to go through on this presentation today, which is comparing two separate data sets. So on this slide, we are talking about census in comparison to the PIT data, because both of these data sets attempt to count the entire population. The census aims to count every person in a geographical area, while the PIT count aims to count every individual experiencing homelessness within a geographical area. So now, while it may look a little intimidating, this analysis is just building off the formula in the last slide, the percent formula. You'll just be doing it twice. This is a really valuable analysis to do because it can highlight demographic discrepancies across race, gender, or ethnicity. And on the screen, you will see a screenshot of the racial disparity we are seeing within the Texas Balance of State geography using the current year's PIT data, as well as the most recent census data from 2023. And I also want to make just one quick note before we move on about census data, is that it can be a little bit difficult to navigate on the census website. As we all know, government databases aren't the most user-friendly. So we only recommend doing this on your own if you're fairly confident with working with large data sets. And if you're not confident in analyzing complex data, such as census data, again, you can always send a request to me at data@thn.org to assist. Perfect. Before we move on, I'm going to stop right here again just to see if anybody has any questions, because I know this is a lot of information and I just want to make sure everybody's doing good. Not seeing anything still, but I will wait. We are patient.
Not seeing anything in the Q&A pod either, so I think you're good.
Okay, we'll keep on trucking along. So, all right. So the final data analysis I'm going to talk about today is using your PIT data and HIC data together. So using point in time count data as well as housing inventory count data. So this data snapshot right here on the screen is meant to demonstrate the gaps in housing to serve those identified as experiencing homelessness through the PIT count. So the housing inventory count was utilized to demonstrate the permanent housing inventory because it's the most comprehensive housing data set that we have across our geography, similar to how the point in time count is the most comprehensive data set we have regarding people experiencing homelessness within our geography. So the PIT measures people, the HIC measures housing, and we look at them together, we can analyze both the need and what we have available to us. So these permanent housing beds include both rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing beds. So this type of analysis can be really powerful to help demonstrate the needs as well as the capacity your community has to respond to that need, like I mentioned. So luckily, this is already a template that we have developed and can send it to folks if you don't want to start from scratch. All it requires you to do is to manually fill out each of these associated cells and then do the subtraction as outlined in the third column highlighted in orange, that one titled Inventory Gap. Right, perfect. So for those of you who are not super familiar with presenting data or would like to brainstorm some ways to get more confident with it, here are some tips and tricks I have learned over my time here at Texas Homeless Network. So talking points, of course, are the main highlights you want people to take away from the presentation, which can be very helpful to keep your audience engaged. Much like I did earlier in this presentation, it is important to talk about variables in your community that may have impacted the data. Variables can include the number of volunteers, of course, the time spent hotspot mapping, day of count logistics, and any specific obstacles you might have encountered, such as if there was bad weather in your area or maybe a COVID spike. Any stuff like that will add an excellent amount of context so people can visualize the data. As we know, people have different learning styles as well. And as much as you can, I recommend trying to find ways, I recommend trying to find ways to play into those different learning styles. Just like what Kira and I did in this particular presentation, a mixture of visual elements such as text, pictures, and charts, as well as, some audio narration can help ensure that your audience is interacting with this data in a way that makes sense to them. Very similarly to what I say about the importance of practicing your PIT surveys out loud, it is also very important to practice your presentation out loud. In fact, a couple hours before this very presentation, I was practicing this exact presentation to make sure that all my talking points flowed. This will help you develop confidence as you help anticipate questions that might also be asked during your presentation. Um, so if you realize that maybe you're not feeling confident about presenting the data, you can also feel free to, again, reach out to us at data@thn.org so staff can work with you on either developing talking points or attending the meeting to help you assist. So one caveat to this that I would like to mention is that THN staff will assess our capacity, of course, and we will attempt to accommodate all requests, but we want to say to please allow us a minimum of 1 month notice if your request involves any specialized materials to be created. Perfect. And finally, one quick note just about infographics. If you feel confident making graphics, these are a wonderful tool because you can use them both in your presentations and you can send them out on their own via email or social media. If you're not confident in making infographics, you can have just as much impact by writing a blog post with visuals or creating a specialized PowerPoint, such as this one, or releasing data snapshots over the important data elements, like those little images that I had on a couple slides ago. And I just want to stress, really important, there is not one correct way to present data. As we've mentioned, people have different learning styles, and we want to make sure that we can accommodate folks and do the best with what we are given. Okay. So another way to spice up your presentation and also give yourself a little break from talking and summarizing for folks is to utilize some interactive polling and prompting questions. So not only does this help ensure that your audience is understanding what you're presenting, but it also gives them a level of autonomy over what they take away from the presentation. The more connected they feel with the data, the more likely they are the more likely they are to find the presentation impactful. I put some example questions on this slide to help give you some ideas of questions I've used in the past, such as, what is this data telling you? What about this data is surprising you, etc. Okay. Most important slide. So if you don't take one thing, if you take nothing else from this presentation, this should be the one thing. Please remember that you are not expected to know everything. Of course, there are going to be times that a question is asked and you don't know the answer to it, or you might become flustered when someone makes a statement you weren't prepared for. This has happened to me all the time. So here's some of the many phrases that I have said when I run into this situation. Just remember, be honest, speak with confidence, and know that it's not okay. That would be so bad if I said that. Know that it is okay to not be perfect. That would have been really bad if I said, oh, it's not okay to not be perfect. No, it is completely okay to not be perfect. All right. So these are some of the phrases, you can always say, I don't know about that. Let me get back to you once our team had a chance to look this over. You can always say, off the top of my head, I don't know the answer to that question, but I'd be happy to check in with my team and we will send you the information that we find. It's always important to touch base with people that, maybe you weren't able to answer their question either via phone call or via email. That's something that I've also done all the time when I don't have the answer to a particular question. All righty. So before we get into our Q&A section, I wanted to highlight some of the many THN resources you can utilize to assist you on your journey to talking about data. When you download this presentation, all of these are hyperlinked here for your convenience. Okay, so again, I know that was a lot. I'm going to stop here and see if we have any questions. This is our open Q&A time, so feel free to ask all the questions that you want. Yes, absolutely. I'm going to send out a copy of this presentation to all our pit leads once this presentation ends. So you'll be getting that in your email shortly. Thank you for that question, Marcia. Also, good to see you. How do we reserve you for the GCHC for August? Please send me an email about that and we can work something out. Or like a time frame that I can attend that. Thank you very much. I guess no questions mean that this is getting through, which is good. I'm glad that this has all been understandable to folks because I know it's a lot, and sometimes presenting can be a little daunting. Like when I did this very exact presentation about a year ago, I was just talking about this with Kira and Craig before we started. I was super nervous when I was doing my first presentation, but the more you do it, the more confident you get. And yeah, same exact thing with that. I see one question here in Q&A.
Yeah, we've got would it be possible to add a question about where someone went homeless in the city limits, what county, what state?
That's a really great question. We have received a lot of input from pit leads about adding questions such as that, like when you first began homeless or when you first became homeless, like at what time. While we might not be able to like add that to the survey itself, these are, supplemental questions that you can still ask to respondents during the pit count and record those responses in the notes section. Yeah, Kira, do you have anything to say about that?
I would just add that we are going to ask for folks' feedback on the survey and try to gather as much information as we can. The caveat being that since the pit count survey is used across our full geography, we have to make sure that the questions that we're adding are conducive and helpful to everyone. And so that is a question we've had in the past. I think there's been mixed results about how beneficial it was. So when we do send out for feedback, please feel free to add that and we will do what we can.
Cool. Thank you, Kira. All righty. Seems like we're doing good on question. Oh, I see one more right here. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Nancy. Cool. I suppose we'll go ahead and wrap up if there's nothing else. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything else. Okay, cool. Well, I'm glad this was all understandable for everybody. So, to just quickly wrap up, I want to mention, like who to which email to contact, depending on what you're looking for regarding your pit data. So for general pit count questions for 2023 or for the upcoming year, we're always thinking about the next year in 2024. Please email me at ava@thn.org. That's just my first name @thn.org. And for specialized reports, presentation requests, or any other data requests, maybe you need an individualized report for a particular city within your geography, please email data@thn.org. Perfect. So reports were emailed to all our pit leads, and they're also posted on our THN website that is hyperlinked here in this presentation. And additional reports can also be pulled by city or town and zip code if desired. Please just contact me, let me know, and I can get that to you. And I'm hoping to also release a blog post by the end of June with the findings for the pit count, as well as our official 2023 Texas Balance of State COC pit data infographic. That was a mouthful. It won't be titled that, but we will be releasing our infographic pretty soon. We are working on finalizing that, so you can post that on social media and share that with any interested parties. Cool. Alrighty, so I just want to thank everybody for attending this webinar. I hope you found it informative. And yeah, again, here's my contact information. Again, it's just my first name at thn.org, and you can also call my phone number and I can get back to you. Alrighty, thank you all so much.